Thanks. So let's talk fucking Bob Lazar and that spacecraft. He insisted on calling them flying saucers, not UFOs.
Yeah, because he didn't know that they were unidentified because they had them.
Right. So we're gonna call them flying saucers as well.
It's fine by me.
Yeah, just for the sake of uniformity.
Yeah.
I'm really most interested in the propulsion system, or I guess it's not a propulsion system because it doesn't propel it; it draws it.
It's the power plant. We'll call it the power plant because it not only drove. It was not only the powertrain, but it also generated the power to run the sensor suite, and we're assuming that it has some type of life support system in there to keep the occupants alive.
Well, I don't think they have to. Like, I don't think it's
like they don't have to breathe.
I don't think it's that long of a trip.
Well, that's fair, but I mean,
I think that there's some sort of I think there's some sort of stability feature inside, just because of the sheer maneuvers and the G-force that goes into these things. Like, so watching the one video, the gimbal video, where they were talking about where those F-18 pilots were trailing the one
with the FLIR Pod.
Yeah, and they said it was going and it would make these 90-degree bank turns, and without decelerating, it wouldn't slow down and then pull up. It was full speed and then up.
Right.
They estimated the G-force for that. I mean, like, so people have gone at like Mach 6.
The current record holder, I think, last time I checked, is 11 Gs.
Okay, so 11 Gs, and then like people start blacking out or way before that.
Oh yeah, and this isn't done like in a plane. They don't send someone up and be like, "Go till you black out."
Yeah,
it's in a sling. It's in one of those rocket sleds.
Right. So people are blacking out at 11 Gs. They estimated the G-force for this thing to make a 90-degree turn at that speed was somewhere around 10,900 Gs.
Yeah, so they've got some kind of inertial dampening.
I feel
something.
Like they would have to, because otherwise it would just fucking liquefy anybody inside.
Oh no, yeah, you would be a water balloon on the side of the the cockpit. What happened to Bob? Oh, he didn't have a seatbelt on.
Yeah, he's the wallpaper now. Yeah. But I'm really interested in the power, like the power plant. It's a reactor, but it's 100% effective.
No, it's 100% efficient.
Yes, I'm sorry, 100% efficient.
Yeah, I mean it is effective. highly effective.
Super effective.
It's super effective.
But
Pikachu used Thunderbolt.
It was super effective. It's so effective though efficient that it doesn't generate heat.
Well, it doesn't even generate light.
Right.
So I mean, it's to the point where either their collection method for generating the wireless power that it transmits.
Yeah, because nothing's hooked up to anything.
Right. So like it's like having a Samsung on a wireless charging surface. But
see, every time they brought that up, Bob would tell him, no, that's not it. That's an electromagnetic.
Right. But the whole inside of that thing is its own conductor. I mean, the way that those work, if anybody hasn't seen the guts of one of those, they're really cool. I highly recommend it. There's actually a couple of companies that make them for models, like for Gundam and car models. Mm-hmm. It's called an XBase. So it's like a 90 degrees, so like a wall, and then an actual platform for you to sit it on. And it shoots, power wirelessly through 2 coils. And it'll hit LEDs that have little capacitors built onto the back of them. So if you want to have this cool little street scene with your Camaro running headlights and stuff, your 1/18th scale Camaro, you set it on this base and the headlights and taillights pop up without having to run any wires anywhere.
Okay.
And it's all done through those coils, but it's transmitted through the walls. So just because Bob said, when you set something down on that, it's from a coil and it's going through induction into your battery's capacitor that charges your battery from the capacitor. So essentially the UFO would work similar to the XBase.
Flying saucer.
Sorry, I fucked it up 3 times in a row. Flying saucer. So essentially it works like that. It works like an XBase. So the generator or the power plant or whatever you want to call it, the reactor.
Right, the reactor in the middle.
Is the platform.
So hold on. First of all, before we go further, this reactor is a flat plate. It's like on a stand in the middle.
Yeah, it's on a pedestal.
It's on a pedestal in the middle of this craft on the floor. So like this is the entry floor.
Right. And you walk in the front door and then you see 3
Boom,
seats.
living room.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the living room is the fireplace, this fucking reactor. And it's on a pedestal. It's a flat table. And it has this beaker shape in the middle.
Yes.
And at the top of this beaker shape is a cap that fits over it. The beaker comes up and it fits over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And at the bottom of this beaker is like a little tube that goes right down and back into the plate, which becomes part of the pedestal, which is fixed to the floor.
Right.
There's no wiring or anything. There's just this tube. And you take the cap off and you put in this little triangle of 115, element 115.
Which looks suspiciously like
copper.
Well, I was going to say copper, but it almost looks like what they used for
Forbidden Doritos.
Forbidden Doritos.
That's what. Have you seen it?
I've not seen Forbidden Doritos.
Oh, yeah. Well,
but if you've seen Iron Man 2, there's a scene in the plot. Spoiler alert for a movie that's fucking 5 or 6 years old now at this point. But there's a scene where the whole plot of the movie is Robert Downey Jr.'s character Tony Stark is getting sick from the palladium in his chest running his arc reactor. So he's trying to find something to replace it, and it comes out that his dad was close to creating a new element, and it looks like a hollow triangle. It's silver. I mean, it's not solid like the renderings that these guys are doing. But it's a silver triangle, and he creates it and calls it a new element. I can't remember what he tried to call it, but it's either fiction feeding off of reality, because I mean Bob's story of 115 has been out since the 80s, so maybe someone did a real deep cut.
Right, and I mean like here's a model of it. So there's the beaker shape, the 115 on top, and the little tube that comes out.
Yeah. Part of me wonders if, even if it is 100% efficient, maybe that's for some type of cooling, or it may just be a structural brace, because like you said, this thing does.
Yeah, 115 115 affects light.
Right.
So they did the cloud chamber test where they filled a little chamber with a cloud and ran a light beam through it, and it bent the light beam because of its gravity.
Just super dense. I mean, it's unbelievably dense.
It affects gravity, but do we know how it affects gravity? Because
well, I mean, gravity, essentially, the bigger or denser the object is, because you don't necessarily need to be big to be dense. So, point of fact. So, lead, the same, a 25-cent piece of lead versus a 25-cent piece that's an actual U.S. currency, the lead piece is going to be heavier.
Right.
So, just because the piece of 115 they were testing in that cloud chamber was, I think they said the size of a pinhead. It was something ridiculously small. It was dense enough to bend light. And the reason why they probably only used a piece that small was logistically, it's kind of a pain in the ass to move something that's super, super fucking small and unbelievably heavy.
Right. That's real. That makes sense. Like moon rocks. but heavier.
Right.
And the way he said that they had to manufacture that was they had a cylinder of this stuff, and it was comprised of stacked discs. So they had these stacked discs that
they were oddly cut too. He said they had weird angles.
Well, he that was after they lathed it. So what they would do is they would stack the discs, and then they would fuse them together and make a cylinder. And then from that cylinder, they would machine a cone, a 3D cone, and then they would take that cone and then they would cut that at odd angles. Mm-hmm. And then what you were left with was this triangle,
right?
That looks like a Dorito, but like a copper Dorito,
which I want as a paperweight now.
Kinda, yeah.
On my desk at work.
Yeah, Doritos, get on it. And you put that upside down in the center of this beaker, in the center of this reactor, and then you put this half dome like this. It looks like the bottom of an old mixing bowl.
If anybody wants to look it up, look up the Demon Core. It looks oddly similar to the setup for the Demon Core,
identical.
Which makes sense because the Demon Core is essentially quote unquote a primitive reactor. It was a 1940s equivalent of a small scale test for what is now our nuclear power plants, because it was two different halves of two different radioactive materials, and it worked like the hydrogen bombs do, where you insert one material inside of the other and it starts to create fission.
Right. So the way this works is, and I watched a video from 2 Minute Physics, which explained it really well. And what they said was that for every action there's a reaction. So for every existing electron there's a positive electron or positron. For every negative quark there's an up quark, and they all exist, but when they collide, when they meet, they destroy each other. What was the word? They annihilate each other. They cancel each other out.
Right, matter and antimatter.
Right. So matter and antimatter are canceling each other out, and that energy's got to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm thinking is what I'm thinking personally, what they're doing is using matter and antimatter in this reactor and forcing that energy to go down to those gravity amplifiers like they were talking about that are below deck there, and then using the amplifiers to direct it to those things that were actually below the surface of the ship, and that's how they get around. But so they have the reactor in the middle and the 115 in the reactor. They put the top of the sphere on there, and it's all wireless. It's just sitting there. It's not wired to anything.
At least that they can see. I mean, they didn't go cutting the floor up to check for ducting or anything.
They didn't
like
have
that.
to. Do you remember him talking about the floor, the way it collapsed?
I didn't get that far, no.
Oh, he said one of his favorite parts of the thing was they had the craft had this honeycomb floor.
Oh, okay.
And he said like if you take a 6-pack, the center of a 6-pack, like from a case of beer, and you press down on it from the top, it's strong or stronger.
Right.
But if you squeeze it from the sides, it just collapses.
Mm-hmm.
He said that was this floor. And so they were walking on it, and then you were able to just stick your finger in the corner and slide it like that with minimal effort, and it would slide open, and it was a hatch to go down below.
Weird.
And he was like, I recognize this. We can make this.
Mm-hmm.
I know this.
Right. Well, and even like the opaque window, he was talking about, like, that's technology that exists in 2019.
Now. So, I mean, along with wireless technology, with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and like wireless data transfer and AirDrop and
NFC, I think, is Amazon's, or not Amazon, but Android's version of that.
Yeah, near field connection.
Yeah.
And so you've got this technology that's based on stuff that we found in these crafts.
This has been another presentation from Super Network.